Hello, I am Polygon, and I am back with another 3D character critique. This time I have a 3D model of Wreck-It Ralph sent in by Koji Ito. Koji says, "Hi Polygon, I am a professional 3D modeler, and I'm always inspired by your stylized characters." Well, thank you, man. That's very kind of you. Well, let's get in here and take a look at your model and see what we can critique, and take a look at it and maybe try to push a little bit further. The first thing I'll say is fantastic job on this. I think you have captured the likeness very well. From the front view, I would say that this is pretty much spot on, and I'm going to have to nitpick you a little bit in a few different areas to help you kind of push this a little bit further. And these are going to be very small kind of nitpicky things, like I said, so take them as you will. From the profile, I couldn't really find a ton of good images of Wreck-It Ralph from the profile. A lot of them are very similar kind of front-on views or stuff for like posters and that kind of thing. So if you watch the movie or if you have the film, you can probably get in there and screenshot a bunch of different stuff. Just quick little profile shots that you can find of him, and that'll probably help you figure out the profile a little bit more. So I'm not really too sure on some of this stuff here, but I'll critique what I can see here. I'll also very quickly mention you have some stuff kind of messed up with the scale of your model. I'll link a video down below if you want to go watch that first before I get in and critique on this. I think it'll help you out a lot moving forward. Alright, so one of the first things that I kind of noticed on this dude was his jawline. You got this nice, clean, rounded shape here, and it looks really good. So you have this nice kind of hard edge here wrapping around, and it kind of just stops about right here. So if I am going to do something like this, I typically want to blend the edge a little bit better. Whenever you're going from a sharp edge to a softer area or more of a flat, it's a really hard thing to do. It's really hard to transition that well. So what I actually recommend for this area is, because I'm seeing a little bit more shadow here and it feels like there's a sharper cutoff, and by looking at a couple other references online, it looks like to me that this line kind of follows through all the way around just a little bit more. I'll shift my light here very quick just so I can see a little bit better and try to get a little bit closer to the form change that we're seeing there. So there's probably a few different changes you could do here to get a little bit closer to that. But what I recommend doing is, again, using the pinch brush like I am right now. You can use lazy mouse or kind of just freehand it, whatever you want to do. I always prefer lazy mouse because it's just a little bit easier. But after you get a little bit closer to that look and feel, then what I recommend doing is using your subdivisions and smooth brush to your advantage and going back through and trying to soften that edge a little bit more. And I'll do that for just a second here. And we can kind of retain that sharper kind of shadowed transition right through there. Kind of like what we're seeing there. If we shift our light around, we kind of get that crisp, clean shadow. But at the same time, we're starting to transition the jawline a little bit nicer, and we no longer have just a really kind of sharp line or sharp edge that kind of just immediately stops and feels a little bit abrupt and out of place. So starting to transition that not just from this area is what I'm aiming at here, but more so kind of the whole length of that jawline. So I think that feels a little bit better, and I would start playing with that a little bit more, looking at maybe some profile images like I mentioned for that, as well as just kind of overall silhouette and form here. The other thing that I can kind of nitpick you on just a little bit is his nostrils maybe feel a little bit too large, or if anything, maybe it's just the transition that you have of this kind of first edge loop where it starts to gradually turn in there. And that might just be a result of kind of subdividing this in ZBrush and having the mesh smooth out. So you might want to play with this shape a little bit more just to get that feeling a little bit closer to what I'm seeing in the concept. So it's kind of like I think it's a combination of the size as well as, it's a little tough to tell, but I think it's more so the transition and kind of soft, gradual dipping in that we're getting as that shape kind of rolls around there. So I'd play with that a little bit, as well as Looking at your brows, I think some of the form up here is a little too tight, and it's a little tough to see, you know, when they have this different kind of like skin shade material on here, as well as some poly paint. So I would maybe play around with your brows and soften up some of the form there. I really like the transition that you have here, and if anything, I would actually say it might be a good idea to get some more volume through here. Get some more volume through there, and then start to soften out that transition. It looks like there's a pretty strong cutoff between that area, and you have the geometry to do something like this. If we step down, your topology is very nice on this, and I think you shouldn't have any problem kind of building that up a little bit more and starting to work on, again, using your smooth brush and subdivision levels in an attempt to kind of soften out some of that transition. We're getting a little bit of a better kind of edge quality transition back through here, and this is the kind of stuff that I would like to see similarly happening down in your jawline. I'm not sure if he has a little piece of geometry in here for an eyelash. It's kind of hard to tell from this image. That might literally just be a shadow, but you might want to play around with putting something in there, just like a cube tube or something very simple. For reference what that could look like, I have a cube tube brush that I use quite often, and I like to use the stroke menu with the curve modifier size turned on. And what I'll do is just adjust this curve a little bit and then draw out my cube tube very quickly. And it's starting to snap to some parts that we don't want. So let's adjust our curve a little bit there as well. We can tap to update. Move that over a little bit more. We're getting there. Let's adjust this as well. And let's see. So we're still quite a bit thick. Just decrease the size of that. There we go. So something a little bit closer to that. And then obviously you'll need some time to manipulate this further and get it perfect. But just as a quick example and demonstration, then we can just set this to black really quick. So something like that, start playing around with your curve brushes, maybe have something similar to a cube tube brush like I do. This is a custom brush, it's available on my Gumroad. You can get a similar effect with a curved tube snap brush, but it's not going to be the exact clean geometry that I have up here. And then the only other thing here in the face that really stood out to me, or actually two really quick things. I think you can get some more depth in your ears. I think you have the shape pretty much spot on. If anything, you could probably square them out a bit more compared to the silhouette that you have. It's a bit more rounded than what we're seeing here. So probably square those out just a little bit more. And then try to get some more depth in the inner ear here for this shape. So play around with those two things in your ears, and I think you'll be good. I don't think that'll take you too long at all. The other thing that I noticed in your face was with your lips. I think you can get a little bit more form out of these. We'll kind of just have like a little open hole. You've done a decent job on the lower lip, but I think you can get some more form there. So real quick, I'm just going to use my transpose line to mask. And I'm actually going to open the mouth a little bit because I find it easier to get in here and sculpt when I have something like this open a little bit. And then we'll use our pinch brush to get a little bit of that lip transition. So we'll just kind of pull that all the way across and try to get that a little bit closer. So play around with that for your lips. And I think you can kind of do the same thing for your upper lip as well. Try to get a little bit more transition there. It's very thin and very small, so in all honesty, it might be easier for you to do this in the low poly just by kind of pushing and pulling points around, just because you have such clean topology here. So play around with that area for a little while, and I think you'll be in a very, very good place with your face. I think there are other like hyper small things that you could do here proportionally, but I think you're pretty much spot on. Again, look at your profile for the face, and I think you'll be in a good spot. The only other thing I'll mention is your hair. First of all, I guess your hair has kind of these open end caps. If I turn on double, it'll be a little bit easier to see inside of these. So I'm not sure what brush you used to make these or exactly how you did this, but I would consider retopoing the hair or possibly using something like the curve tube snap brush. And again, using that curve modifier size, going from larger to small, you can get a similar effect, a similar effect to what you have going on. I'll just pull this out so we can see it a little bit easier. But it will have an end cap on that kind of sealed off for you. And then with that brush, you can use the brush modifiers to adjust how many sides that shape will have. So maybe play around with that, or if you plan on retopoing the hair later on, I don't think it'll be that big of an issue for you. The other thing is that maybe you could stick to the silhouette a little bit more closely for what I'm seeing as we come up around here. If I just kind of outline some of the shapes and kind of stick to this, I'm just very quickly, can't really see with my fat hand in the way too much right now, doing this all as one large silhouette. But I think you get the idea. Just kind of maybe go into Photoshop or something, do a quick draw over in an attempt to figure out the silhouette a little bit better. I don't know if you intend on doing some fibers for the hair or what your plan is for this, but I think that'll help you get a little bit closer to some of the larger form silhouette changes that we see here. For instance, you know, this kind of larger spike as well as this one up here. And I think in some areas it just gets a little repetitive and boring where you could use some larger shapes. For instance, in the sideburns, this gets really repetitive and boring. And in all honesty, I think you could represent most of this with all of one shape. So using something like a select rectangle, we can just grab a few of these real fast. Whoops, my bad, split those off. And instead of using something like this, I think you could just Dynamesh them all together or use a completely different mesh that looked really messy, so that wasn't being super friendly. So just using maybe a more simple mesh would probably be the better route here to go. And then kind of blending that up into the rest of your hair. Whereas right now, this just feels all too similar. So if nothing else, I would say just break up this shape a little bit more. Try to get some more variation in terms of the size and scale of these. Right now, they're all going the exact same direction and are exactly the same size. And all the same geometry, so I can tell that these were all just duplicated very quickly. So play around with that. And then, you know what, I think that's pretty much all I'll say on the hair. There may be a couple other things in terms of accuracy that I would say pay attention to, but I think you're going to get most of those once you really start getting in and paying attention to the silhouette. The only other thing I'll leave you off with is, you know, silhouette is super important, but also internal silhouette is super important. For instance, if we look at the hairline, it's a really clean line wrapping up all the way around the face, right? Whereas with what we have here with this shape, yours is quite a bit more all over the place. And that's because, you know, just the way you've done this, you're using these larger shapes of the hair. But I would say look at your internal silhouette lines a little bit more up in your hair, and I think that'll help you figure out some other stuff as well. Well, that's pretty much all I have to say on this one. I hope this critique has been helpful for you, Koji, as well as some other people that are watching this. And if you guys want to get your stuff critiqued in the future, you can send it to my email address, polygon@gmail.com, include a ZTool file and some information about what you want me to critique, as well as maybe a reference image if you're using one, and hopefully you are. If you found this video helpful, check out gumroad.com/polygon, where I have even more tutorials, courses, brushes, materials, all the stuff that I use professionally for my work. Check it out, there's a link down below, and I will see you guys next time. Have a great day.